that brings me to the next question, which you partially covered as well. Can alkaline water buffer acid? And what's the difference then between would, for example, adding a baking soda or pH drops, or making alkaline water through the process of electrolysis or ionization, would that have an effect on acid or a liquid lower than pH 7?
That's a very good question, Veronica. And by the way, very well stated. Because here's the thing, we can't just say alkaline water. We need to preface our conversation with what caused that water to be alkaline. Is it because it came out of a mountain that had very water-soluble minerals that were able to be grabbed by the water and brought into itself? And so therefore, you know, there are some waters in the US here where you have 8.2, 8.4 pH coming out of the mountain because of the minerals being water soluble. You have other waters coming out of mountains that are 5.5 pH. So those waters that are 8.2, 8.4 would be considered alkaline, and it's because of mineral content. Well, that can be significantly different than water coming out of an electrolysis device that is higher pH, but not based on mineral content, based on electrolysis or the by-process of electrolysis. So when let's focus our conversation on electrolysis, because that's what we're talking about in these videos is electrolysis. So in the mechanism of electrolysis, separating water and affecting the chemistry of water, and the net result are two streams of water, one being what we call acid water because it's lower than 7 pH, the other being alkaline because it is higher than 7 pH. The alkaline water has little to no buffering capacity until you get up to, let's say, 10, 11 pH. Then you will have some slight buffering capacity because you will have some salts, some calcium salts develop. The reality from a perspective of science or study, it's been studied, and to buffer the same amount of stomach acid, because we know stomach acid is highly, highly buffered. There's not much that can survive stomach acid. It's hydrochloric acid, very, very powerful. Whereas you could take a 15-ounce glass of water at a pH of 10, drop a few drops of lemon juice, which, by the way, lemon juice would be a 2 pH, and it would plummet the pH of that alkaline water out of an electrolysis machine. So we know, even from a simple perspective of dropping lemon juice into a water, just a few drops can plummet the pH. We know that the water is not going to last in the stomach with hydrochloric acid. However, what we need to understand in all of it is just because the pH is higher doesn't mean there's any buffering capacity. And a study was done showing that you would have to drink 10,000 liters of a pH 10 water out of an electrolysis device to buffer the same amount of stomach acid as a quarter teaspoon of baking soda. So there's no comparison to a baking soda. Baking soda is highly buffering. Alkaline water would have little to no buffering capacity in the body. So for someone to say, which means there are people that say it buffers acids in the body, there's really no ability for alkaline water to do that.
Mm-hmm. And when you say that baking soda has much higher buffering capacity, would that also mean that it wouldn't be recommended really for people to use that in their drinking water just to make it alkaline? Can that actually cause damage?
Well, I don't know if it causes damage, but what it will do is put an additional burden on the body, because anytime you're buffering stomach acid, the body has to produce more stomach acid. Because if you're raising the pH in the stomach, the body then produces more HCl and lowers the stomach pH, and then you have bicarbonates going into the blood, either potassium or calcium bicarbonates, depending on the diet. But the reality is every time you put that burden on the body for it to create hydrochloric acid, you're making the body produce hydrochloric acid. So some people have difficulty as they get older producing hydrochloric acid. Some people have low stomach acid. And therefore, if you were giving them that burden, it would be very difficult for their body. It would not be a wise thing to do to force their body to be constantly producing stomach acid.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what about, I have read some articles on the fact that drinking water, again, when we talk about electrolyzed water, ionized water in this case, so drinking water above pH 10 wouldn't be also recommended. Could you expand on that? Would that be true, or?
Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, as we know, in the last 13 years, I can tell you there are many, many people that drink and teach to drink water at a higher than 10 pH. There are some companies out there that market products and the machines that do electrolysis, and they tell people, oh, if you have these certain diseases, you need to drink this 11 plus pH water. I think that's very, very problematic. I think it's very bad advice. I would tell you that in my history, there's about 10 to 15% of the population that have a negative effect on their body by when they drink pH over 10. And it's just, everyone's a little bit different. And some people can drink the highest pH that comes out of these machines and be fine with it from day one. They can, they just go pour it and go for it, and the body is okay. It's resilient. There are other people that really need to work their way up for their body not to respond. So there is what's called a Hertzheimer effect, and there is some issues with some people who it just knocks their system out of balance if they drink too high a pH. So, this is why it's important to understand and not to make blanket statements that, hey, this is okay or this is good. We need to make sure that we look at every individual individually, and if their system is telling them, I don't like this, then we need to pay attention and ask the question why. It could be that they're going through a detoxification, but more times than not, that's an excuse in my opinion. A lot of people give people high pH water and their body is having a tough time dealing with it because it's just not the way their system is designed to function, or maybe they have weaknesses in other areas that this causes that to be exploited. We need to not just make excuses, go, oh, it's a detox symptom, when it may not be a detox symptom. So for some people, it can be a problem. For other people, it's not. And I think it's about maybe 10%, maybe, a little more, but those people do have effects, yes, on drinking higher pH water, higher than 10. And I have never and would never recommend. In fact, in our owner's manual of our machine, we say in there, it's not recommended to drink pH 10 water all the time, higher than that. If you have, a situation where you feel like you're getting, run down or sick or something, and you want to bolster your system or something, that's fine. But really, there's no need to drink a pH higher than 10 ever.
Mm-hmm. And then the benefit of that would come from, not from the pH, but from another quality of the water, which we will discuss later.
Right.
Yeah. How about on the other side of the spectrum? So we talked about, and again, it may be a common myth, or it is a common myth that then someone would say drinking water that's slightly acidic or drinking rainwater wouldn't be beneficial for the body either.
I don't think
what's your take on that?
So my personal opinion is that it doesn't matter to the body. I really don't think it does. And I know that there are people out there that slam alkaline water. There's people out there that slam reverse osmosis, distilled water. Really and truly, I don't think it makes much difference to the body, the pH of the water. Now, we need to make sure we have two terms that we explain correctly, because people get confused. I've heard people interchange alkaline and alkalinity, and these are two completely different things. Alkaline or acid simply is talking about higher or lower than 7 pH. Alkalinity is how much mineral content is in the water. And you could have a water that's high or low pH with no minerals in it, and it's not buffered. Even like distilled water is going to have an acid pH because there are no minerals in it. Mm-hmm. As soon as you would add some minerals back in, the pH would rise right back up. And you could take that water to an 8 or 9 pH, that's fine. Just add some minerals back in. So we need to understand that because there are no minerals in water, that doesn't mean there's a problem with the water. Where you live, Veronica, is very low mineral water. So that water coming out of the beautiful mountains that you're so lucky to live around would naturally be acid. If you were to test it on a pH scale, it would be not as acid as distilled water, but it would be an acid pH. And drinking that would be no problem. I've heard conversations, or I've heard people say, oh, if you drink water that has low mineral content, it's going to pull the minerals out of you. I don't know where this information came from. I have no idea where the information came from, because it's not true. And the minerals that are in water are inorganic mineral rock. The minerals that we need in our body are organic, typically from food. So, and I don't know why on earth someone would think that water somehow would take precedence over our own body once it's inside of our body to take things from us, simply because somehow the idea that water would need those minerals. If water needed the minerals, then there would be no water on earth that didn't have minerals in it, and that's not true. We have people in Germany. I was just talking with a wonderful gentleman who we both know last week, and he said that there are some waters in his area that have 300 TDS of minerals. There's other waters in his area that have 5 TDS. I mean, that's almost nothing in it naturally. So we need to understand that some of these principles that people teach are not true, and they're based, I believe, on, at some point there were people that were marketing things. And so unfortunately, some people have to sell in a negative manner. They have to talk something down to create a need for their product. We don't do that. We talk about the need because there's a need. And we need to be careful not to say, hey, if you drink this water or this water, that's going to ruin your health. I don't believe it is. Water is there for 3 reasons. Hydration, number 1. Number 2, every system in our body, whether it's digestion or logic, whether it's joints, water is used to pressurize the joints in our body. Water is used for digestion because you can't create elimination without water. Also, 3/4 of our body is water, and water can carry frequencies, energies, different information that we're just beginning to understand now. But that's also a part of the body's energy and frequencies inside the body. And water is amazing in that it can broadcast, and it can be a very, very beautiful solution, which we don't truly understand. But it has nothing to do with water is somehow going to ruin our health if we drink it without minerals. So I think that's a myth. There's the myth busters. It's false information.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. The next question that I have heard so many times in the past was the phenomenon of microclustering. Now, what that comes from, tap water may have 15 molecules versus 3 to 5 molecules in a cluster in water. So, and again, when I started to look at where does that actually come from, I didn't find any answer.
It's completely false. There's microclustering was a hypothesis back in the 1980s, and it basically, so in 1965 in Japan, the electrolysis devices were made a medical device. Why were they made a medical device? Because study after study of basically 15 years of human trials from 1950 to 1965 in Japan, they did human trials. And what they found is that improper fermentation in the gut was stopped by electrolysis electrolyzed reduced water. They also found that improper fermentation in the gut was stopped. So that primary things caused the Japanese Ministry of Health to make these or deem these machines a medical device. So that's what they did. Well, when they started testing the water and using it in medical uses and what have you, they started seeing that many things were helped. Diabetes and all kinds of things were helped that these individuals had. So then they wanted to figure out, oh my gosh, why is it helping with all these things? We didn't know that hydrogen was involved. I don't want to put a sneak peek there, but we'll dangle the carrot. They didn't know hydrogen was involved. They assumed it was because of the pH, because that was the easiest thing to see or to view in the water. Well, then they had a hypothesis in 1980. So, 15 years later, they're thinking, oh, maybe the water more quickly goes into the body because we know that electrolyzed reduced water is absorbed faster in the body. We know there's a faster gastric emptying of this water. So they were trying to show or study or prove why that happened, because people like that the water goes out of their stomach faster. And the hypothesis was that somehow the structure, size of the molecules, the number of molecules in a water cluster, as it's called, that's why they call it microclustering, was dropped in half through electrolysis. Well, they studied it and studied it and studied it. And back in the 1990s, they proved that it was false. But to give a little background, they used nuclear magnetic resonance, so what's called NMR, and they studied the size, what they thought was the size of the water molecules. So they studied electrolyzed reduced water, reverse osmosis, distilled water, tap water, well water. They took all different samples and they tested them through nuclear magnetic resonance to see. And what came back was a frequency was different. So you may have 100 hertz on well water. Well, it was 50 hertz on electrolyzed reduced water. And all of a sudden they're like, well, holy cow, if it's 100 hertz here and it's 50 hertz, it must be half the size. It wasn't until later that they realized it was actually the pH that was reacting with NMR. It had nothing to do with microclustering. It had nothing to do with a structure change. It was simply pH was reacting with nuclear magnetic resonance. And later they said, oh, this is false. But people selling machines said, whoa, that works for me. People buy into that. So I'm going to keep on talking about it. And that's why we still have it today.